Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of the Ordinary Sacred, and I'm so happy you're back here with me. We're back in our van, in our home. We're in a campground somewhere in California. It's not our favorite campground, but the weather is very nice. It cools off at night, so that's very nice. We're adjusting to first the time change coming into California, and then the daylight savings time change that then put us back another hour. So I don't know if those of you who are neurosensitive like me have a really hard time with time change, but my body has such a hard time being told this is when you need to sleep, this is when you need to eat. So I try to just abide by when it wants to sleep and when it's hungry, regardless of the arbitrary time. Brian and I keep asking each other, what time is it? What is time really, right? So, but we're doing well, and I wanted to create a video for you all before it's time for us to eat lunch, before our bodies tell us it's time to eat lunch. And so today I'm going to do a teaching video on working with polarized parts, and this applies to every single one of us. Um, just like working with polarized people on the outside and mediating that, it's the same dynamic on the inside with parts who are extreme and polarized and think it's either or, it's black or white, it's me or you. And there's a lot of tension and fighting and disconnection between them. And so if you like this video, you may also like a self-paced course that I have on my website that is a completely free gift to you. So if you want to go look up nonviolent communication through an IFS lens on my website, theordinarysacred.com, you can get that for free. You sign up for it, and then the way you access it is you go to my website, and you go at the top, it'll say my library, and you have to put in I think your email and your password, and you'll be able to access everything that you've signed up for from me. And just one more quick thing before I get into the teaching. Very exciting news. We are about halfway to our goal. Our goal is $4,000 to cover all the overhead for the year for my website so that I can offer everything there for free. And many of you have given gifts. If you want to give a gift, you go, I think I have to point this way to the bottom right under the video. It's opposite for me right now. Um, and there's a little heart with the dollar sign, or you might see an ellipses and then see the heart with the dollar sign where you can give a gift if you want to contribute to this. There's no pressure to do that whatsoever, but it all goes toward the overhead of my website. So with the gifts from YouTube and the people who are signed up for the Ordinary Sacred All Access Pass, which essentially is just supporting my website also. So those combined, we have met half. We've raised $2,000 to go toward the website. So excited about that, to tell you about that. And without further ado, I am going to share my screen. And this is this is a PowerPoint that I made when I was doing a 6-week course on IFS, and this is in week 6. So this is kind of a advanced teaching about IFS, and it's about working with polarized parts. So first, I'm going to take a breath. I can sense kind of rushing, urgent energy in my system. So I'm just going to let those parts know that it's okay to slow down, that I'm with them. I think they're feeling urgent, and let me ask them. I noticed a thinking part there. Yeah, I think they're feeling rushed because they want to make sure that I get this done before it's time to eat. So I'm letting them know that we'll just go as slow as as we need to, and maybe we'll make it 2 videos if we need to. All right, so the nature of polarizations. I love this analogy that I first heard from Dick Schwartz, that a polarization is like a fisherman hanging. I think I heard it from Dick Schwartz. Maybe it was Jay Early. I think it was Dick Schwartz. It's like a fisherman hanging out of a rowboat to one side. And so there's two fishermen in, in a boat. And so the other fisherman hanging out in an equal and opposite degree in order to make the boat stay balanced, right? So neither wants to give up their extreme position or else the boat's going to capsize, right? They really do fear that if if this one comes in, the boat's going to capsize this way, or if this one comes in, it's going to capsize that way. So they are both very extreme, but they feel like they have to do this to save the boat, right? And so they're doing it for a reason. Often one of them started doing it first to protect an exile, we'll learn, because of some traumatic experience or attachment wounding or something like that. One learned this extreme response, and then the other developed in the opposite extreme to keep the boat balanced. Um, I'm going to go back for a second. I just want to say something. Just to keep reiterating that this is the same thing, the same dynamic that happens in a relationship. Like if one parent is really permissive with their children, often the other parent will become really strict, uh, bad cop, good cop, in order to try to balance out, right? Often, if one person is um, very anxiously attached, the other person will often become relatively avoidant because they're pushing back on the extreme of the other person's attachment, right? So, this kind of polarization happens in relationships all the time or say politically, right? If someone's views are super extreme and it's like this is always true, that is never good, you are evil, it's us and them, and they're very extreme in their beliefs, then people are going to pull on the other side in an equal and opposite measure, right? To say, no, you're evil and you're stupid and I believe this complete opposite, whereas they might not be so as extreme if the other wasn't pulling to that extreme. They're in response to each other. Okay. So another just kind of example is if you let a pendulum go at a 45-degree angle to one side, it will swing exactly to a 45-degree angle to the other side. If you let it go, 30 degrees, it'll go 30 degrees, right? It'll go exactly equal and opposite. It elicits the exact opposite extremity and the opposite part. For example, if you have a part that wants to merge with and please other people, but it's very extreme, I have to please you at my own expense, then you're likely to have a part that wants to do the opposite, that wants to escape and just be alone. We'll talk about other common polarizations and the dynamic that happens. But often when we have polarizations, what it feels like inside is a stuckness or a confusion, or if we bring some awareness to it, we might actually be aware that we're going to this extreme and then back at this extreme. But when there's that pulling between the parts, it can feel disorienting. It can feel like we're stuck. I can't make any kind of decision because one part wants to do this extreme and one part wants to do the opposite extreme. So it's hard to know what to do, what to feel, what to think. That's kind of a lot of times the internal experience that people have when parts are polarized. So the keys to relieving a polarization are one, healing the exile or exiles that one or both parts protect. Sometimes completely opposite parts are protecting the same exile or exiles. It's really fascinating. They just have a different strategy of how to protect them. And so that's one thing. Often one part started first and the other, again, came in response to balance things out. And so you want to figure out which one was there, took on that extreme role first, and then go underneath, have that vertical relationship, befriend that part, see what they're protecting, and heal that, time travel back, reparent, redo, unburden those parts. And then this part can relax its job. Sometimes it doesn't have to not do it at all. It just comes more into the boat naturally. And then the one who's trying to counterbalance can also come into the boat. So that's one way. The other is by helping the two extreme parts understand each other's good intentions. As they begin to understand each other, they don't have to agree with each other. Again, this is exactly the same on the outside, but as they begin to see each other as um, protecting valuable needs and having good intentions, they might be protecting different needs, sometimes the same need, but in a different strategy. But as they begin to see good intentions, even if they still think the other's impact is negative, as they see good intentions, they begin to allow themselves to come closer and closer together, and they begin to collaborate creatively on a solution that meets both their needs and comes more inside the boat. So those are the two strategies. All right, so let's just talk about some common polarized parts. And there's many, many more than this. So if you want to put in the comments polarized parts that you notice in yourself or in other people, you're welcome to do that as well. So one common one is what people would call a controller or a critic versus an indulger or a binger. This can be seen in binging and purging, or a lot of eating disorder type things where I'm going to eat a lot and then I'm going to uh, starve myself or purge, right? So, or it can just be seen on a yo-yo diet, right? I eat a lot of food. I have a part that soothes me by eating a lot and binging, and then I go on an extreme diet and a cleanse and I lose it all. And so parts can kind of swing back and forth, sometimes in years, right? One part will be dominant for years, and then the other one will be dominant for years. Other times it can be month to month. They exchange being in control, or week to week, or day to day. Sometimes it's hour to hour that they're taking over. Um, Sometimes in conversation, this is a funny uh, recurrence. Brian is very, I call him the parts whisperer. He's aware of my parts, and he knows that sometimes in a moment I'll have polarized parts. So if he is validating and being really empathetic and compassionate to one set of a polarization, then the other part comes out and lashes and explains, but what about this? And so he's in a predicament, because in a partnership, if you side with one side of your partner's polarization, then you're going to start hearing the case for the other side, right? And so he's so wonderful about saying, "Ooh, I see both of you. I see both of your points. I value both of you," right? But it can be really tricky. And a person can appear to be inconsistent or um, unreliable, or like, I can't please you kind of thing. But it really is because they have polarized parts inside of them. So it's just something to know even about a partner. All right, another common one is the taskmaster versus the procrastinator, or a collapsed part. So can there can be different kinds of polarizations. The taskmaster is really a part who's pushing and pushing and pushing you. It can be a perfectionist part. It could be a performing part, right? It's a part who's kind of often pushing you against your own capacities or your own authenticity. And so, and it's protecting parts who feel like they don't have any worth. It's trying to give you worth, right? But if it's extreme, then often on the other extreme, there's going to be a procrastinator part. There's going to be a part that's like, I just am so resistant to constantly having to make these deadlines and do these things that I am going to take you out, distract you, numb you, until the taskmaster gets so big and there's a deadline tomorrow morning and says, you must do it right now, right? Another polarization with this and parts that kind of push us beyond our capacity is that really our body is the response of our body is I'm going to collapse. Um, this can just be a natural consequence, right? That we don't have the capacity. So our bodies have illness and fatigue and all of those kinds of things. Um, because taskmaster parts, perfectionist performing parts often are part of our masking team, right? Or they're the ones who are pushing us beyond our capacity. Again, trying to save us socially, usually, but then physically we're dying, right? So there's these extremes. There can also be parts where we don't actually have, I'm not saying it's not legitimate. We do feel physically fatigued or we have physical pain. But if we go inside and ask, the part is actually doing it very intentionally to counteract the parts that push us beyond our needs or to help us get our needs met from other people because we have something legitimately wrong with us. So they all have good intention and they're all trying to counteract the opposite extreme. Okay, another one. This is very big in my system. You have heard the names of these parts probably if you have listened to many of my videos. Um, the anger self-value part or parts versus the good boy, good girl, people-pleasing parts, right? So that's my Sebastian and my Cassandra. And my Cassandra was my dominant part. Um, Helping me mask, helping me please everyone in front of me in order to survive socially. She was in charge of my inner family, leading the way. And it really wasn't until my early 40s that Sebastian came out of exile. So a protector in exile, who held self-value, and I began to get more in touch with my anger. And so often when I would feel Sebastian come up, this anger basically towards another person who's asking me to do something that um, I don't want to do or I can't do, right? Because Cassandra's saying you have to please the person in front of you. You must. So Sebastian comes up in equal and opposite measure and says, you better not. How dare they even ask for that? Right. And he's really coming up to counterbalance Cassandra. And I appreciate him. So often I'll notice him and I'll say, is Cassandra here? And he'll say, uh-huh, she's right there. Go get her. No, go help her, right? Help her. And so once she feels relaxed enough to say, oh, we don't have to please this person. We're safe. We're safe inside. We're safe in our current relationships and environment. We don't have to please this person or else. Then Sebastian can relax and I have more um, access to my self energy that has clarity and calm and can see, oh, this person's just asking me for this, but I can say no. They're not demanding that I say yes. Sometimes they are. Like you can tell if you say no to someone and they punish you for it, essentially. Um, but yeah, that's usually because I've been in that relationship with a person where I've always said yes, and they're like, wait, what? You're not saying yes to me? So their system is thrown off. And sometimes people can adjust, sometimes they can't, and we lose relationships. But anyway, I'm going on a tangent there. I have lots of videos about my Cassandra and my Sebastian. You can look up parts on people pleasing part. I have some others, I think, too. So another common polarization is dependent or anxiously attached parts versus the distancer or avoidant part. So again, in an external relationship, we can be blended with one part and our partner can be blended with an opposite part in any given moment. But we might actually, like if I'm with a partner that's really, really anxiously attached, I might blend with an avoidant part and try to create space. But if I'm with in a partnership with a person who's really avoidant and leaving me, I may blend with an anxiously attached part toward them, right? But we can also go back and forth even inside of ourselves. Like maybe we have a really anxiously attached part, but another part judges that and says, "You're so pathetic, you're so needy, you're so clingy. What's wrong with you? Stop it." Right? Whenever you hear kind of inner critics inside, there's always a polarization. That's a key. And you can turn toward the critic and say, who are you upset with inside? What are you upset with? What's happening inside? And they're usually pointing at another part. They are so extreme. They're causing problems. They need to stop, right? And so you say, can I go to them and help them? And usually the critic's like, yes, please go help them. And in any kind of polarization in that way. But so say the anxiously attached part is acting out. This critic of that may then want the system to swing to avoidance. So when people act, whether you or another person, in kind of extreme ways, it actually makes sense, even though it feels really disorienting and frustrating. When we have a view of multiplicity, everything is just so much more understandable. Okay, I think this is the last one I have here, maybe. There's a common polarization of a depressed or collapsed part versus an anxious or manic part. So that's why we have manic depression, or people have anxiety and depression. And if you think about it, one is very low energy and the other is very high energy. And again, what is happening is usually there was one or the other first, like I was saying. So you kind of want to identify that. Maybe there's just such heightened mania or anxiety energy in the system, and it's so unsustainable. It's so wreaking havoc, maybe lack of impulse control, like that kind of thing. So another part pulls in an equal opposite direction and says, you're so extreme, we have to completely shut down the system, make you not be able to get out of bed, not shower, not brush your teeth, take all motivation out of you. Again, sometimes it can be just a natural consequence, right? Because our nervous systems are on high. We run out of the resources to stay at that level, and our bodies actually physically collapse. So, again, it's because one's so extreme, the other response is so extreme. Um, okay. Oh, there's one more. The performer part versus the hider part, or as my dear friend Julie calls the share, don't share parts. So often in groups, people will talk about how people have share, don't share parts. They might have parts that really want to share, even some parts that want to, what people consider overshare, right? They just want to spill everything out and say all of their vulnerability. But then after they do that, they have vulnerability hangover, inner critics, shamed parts that come up and give a lot of backlash. So in that moment when they're deciding whether to share, there's a part that's really eager to share and wants to be seen, pulling them forward, and another part that's pulling them back and saying, no, don't share, don't share, don't share. It's too dangerous. In those situations, I often advise people to go with the don't share part, because they have to be on board. The system has to feel safe enough to experiment with sharing a little bit and seeing if the person or people in front of us are safe enough, like can honor and handle our truth or not. And if this one's pulling back, and this one ends up sharing, and then there's any kind of criticism, real or perceived, right, in the other person, or rejection, or shaming, there's going to be a lot of backlash in the system. So it's really important to have enough self-leadership to be able to tell if the person in front of us is safe enough. And if they're not, to have such a secure connection with the self on the inside that we can handle it, even if they do criticize or reject us, right? So we have to have that strong connection on the inside, that safety on the inside, in order to take those risks. Um, that's why in my groups, I never will force anyone to go into a breakout room or to have to share or do anything like that, unless their whole system is on board with it. Okay. So basically, this is kind of a little graph that describes, and I think this is the last slide that I'm going to go over. This describes how to work with polarized parts. Oh, speaking of free resources on my website, I also have a worksheet and maybe even a meditation to work with polarized parts. So if you get the 12 meditations or 16 worksheets on my website, uh, like just having the polarization worksheet in front of you can help kind of direct you and working with each part and what to ask them. And this is a real basic form of it right here. So the first thing is you want to become aware of what two polarized parts you're working with. Like maybe you identify some of those in the last slide and you want to work with them. Maybe there's something else where it's just a part that's doing something and another part that hates it, right? Or a part that really wants you to stay in your job and be responsible and make money for you and or your family. And another part that so desperately wants freedom and wants to be minimalist and wants to get out of the system, right? And their intention, that's another really common one that people have. And so um, they both protect different values and needs, right? So they're both so important to listen to, right? This is what the self knows. It is that it's never an either or. It's always a both and, or as Brian says, an all and, because we can also have parts, more than two parts, like kind of pulling in various directions, prioritizing different needs. And they're all valuable. So another thing is sometimes in like part one and part two can actually be a cluster of parts here and a cluster of parts over here. And you can't really get it wrong. You can just, if you're aware of the pull in your system, this, no, this, as you observe it with open curiosity, it will become clearer and clearer to you. Whether you see images of the parts or you feel their energy, sometimes you just have a knowing that this is a lot of parts. You know, like I have an army of parts that supports my people pleaser, Cassandra. I have an army of inner critics, right? You can kind of feel that there's a lot of energy here or a lot of different parts. It can be a group of parts against one part, right? So, so that can happen as well. So what I like to do, and again, you can get I think I have a meditation where I direct you on this as well. I like to invite the parts into an open space, like an open field, a picnic, or sometimes around a table. Really just do whatever works for you. Some people have said, my parts hate being invited to open fields or to the beach or whatever. Like, well, yeah, you don't have to do that. Um, Honor them, just see like where they feel safe. That's the number one thing, where both parts are going to feel safe and that they both have some kind of attachment to you. So they're willing to come into the same space, even though they may really hate the other one. And you can observe them. Maybe one's really hesitant to come in because they're like, I do not even want to be in the same space with that other part. They're evil, they're stupid, I hate them, right? And you can honor that and let them know, I see that you really don't like that part. You're maybe afraid of them. They are extreme. I understand that. But this exercise, you might explain to that part, the intention of it is to help that part be seen and understood and help what it protects so that it can relax and not have to be so extreme. And usually the other part is like, oh, that would be so wonderful. Maybe I don't really believe it's possible because that part's been extreme all your life, but okay, I'm willing to test it out, experiment with it. So now they're willing to come in. So you always want to listen to the concerns of the parts about even being in the same space together. Sometimes there can also be a negotiation about which part goes first. One part may really want to go first and the other one's arguing. And you want to, again, you just, if you're in self, you can meet their concerns. So you always want to also check how you're feeling toward each of the parts. Sometimes you are blended with a part that's really siding with this one, and that one's terrible. Sometimes you're blended with a part who hates both of them. That can absolutely happen, or who's really anxious about both of them. So you want to recognize that and ask those parts if they will kind of join the lineup, stand next to you, stand with you, or they can go somewhere else safe if they want to. But keep on blending from those parts until you genuinely feel really curious about the two parts and how they make sense and why they do what they do. Okay. So once you have a bit of equanimity and neutrality and curiosity and openness toward both the parts, then you can ask, who wants to go first. And whenever a part has a concern, you ask, you just meet the concern, right? So you might say, what if I go back and forth? Like I asked you a question and then I asked you a question. And or just assure them you will have your turn. I promise you. I will not just listen to them. You will have your turn to also be heard. Okay. So then now I'm coming back to this grid here. So say you've chosen to work with part one. Let's say it's a taskmaster part. And so we'll do taskmaster procrastinator, say. So the taskmaster, the first question I would ask is just like show me your point of view. And again, and the best question I know to ask is just what do you want me to know about you? What do you want me to know about how you see the world? What your fears are, what your good intentions are, like what you're trying to achieve, what you want from me. That's, I guess I put that in also in some of the other questions. But just what do you want me to know, right? What's your point of view? And you don't have to think anything up ever. You don't have to effort at all. It's as if there's another person in front of you and they're just showing you and you didn't know anything until they showed you, right? So it's a receptive stance. And even if there's nothing, that's better than making something up or thinking it up. You don't ever need to do that. If there's nothing, if they're not showing you or telling you anything, that usually means that you are blended with another part or they are used to dealing with another part. There's a reason why they're being silent. So you can ask, who do you see when you look at me? And usually they'll answer that. I see your mom, I see a 5-year-old, I see a part that hates me, right? So you can ask those parts also to stand next to you. And then once they trust you, or you can ask them, what are you afraid would happen if you answered me? They'll say, it's not going to help. You don't really care. And you can say, if it's genuine, I do really care, right? I know you're used to work, interacting with other parts that hate you, but that's not me. And how can I gain your trust? Like maybe you can just show me one thing and see, and you can see if I care about it or not, right? That's kind of what the self would respond, I think, if you are in self. So, and then you can ask, what are your fears? What are you afraid would happen if you didn't do this extreme job? Again, just receive an answer. And sometimes you can ask layered questions, right? Whatever's coming from curiosity. Like if I didn't make you work so hard, you would be worthless. Okay, so that's actually pretty clear that they protect a part who holds the burden of worthlessness. And so you might ask, when did that happen? When did you feel worthless? Or when did another part of me feel worthless? But they might say the boss will yell at you if you don't get this project in. There's like huge consequences. You won't make a living. So maybe they're more concerned about financial security. Like that's why they're pushing you. And you say, oh, okay, that's interesting. When did we have financial insecurity where you learned to do this job for me to protect me? And it might be when you were a child, it might be when you were a young adult. It might not even be at all. It might be a legacy burden from people in your ancestry who dealt with really huge scarcity. So again, you're just really getting curious, okay? Um, Ask them also the good things, right? What's your desire for me in my life? That's going to get some of the good intentions, right? What are the needs you're protecting? What are the values that you have? Again, getting at their good intention. Another question I like to ask polarized parts is, do you have any requests or desires from the other part and or from me as the self? Um, and then the agreement step is at the end after both have been listened to. But so they're just saying, they might say that procrastinator part is so extreme. It makes us veg out and wait until the very last minute. And then I have to really amp it up and cause so much stress in the system before anything will get done. And I just wish they were not so extreme, right? I wish they would work with me, somehow and find a balance. Say, okay, now hopefully, as you are talking to part number one in this example, the taskmaster, part number two has at least been listening. I like to then, when I go to part number two, just say, did you hear all of that? Like, what did you think about their intentions and what they're protecting? And sometimes they're like, they often are more softened from hearing that, just like another person. Like, okay, I still disagree with what they're doing, because my values are kind of opposite, but I get why they're doing it. They make sense. I see that they have good intention. And that goes a long way. So huge. Okay, so then you're going to do the same thing with part two, and hopefully part one is listening. So if it's the procrastinator, say, right? Like, what is your point of view? Tell me anything you want me to know. Again, you don't have to think it up. Just to completely receive whatever's there. What are you afraid would happen if you didn't pull me in into procrastination? Likely or potentially, the part might say the taskmaster, would run your life into the ground, and then the collapse would come in, and you would be sick, you would be debilitated. So I need to bring some kind of fun and enjoyment into your life, or you will be totally devoid of it if he's taking over. Again, he's leaning out of the boat this far, so I gotta lean out of the boat this far to create balance. I believe it's Dick Schwartz who says a polarization is a burdened system's way of trying to achieve balance. Now, when we unburden parts, balance comes by them working together like this, right? But they have good intention. It's a burden system's way of trying to achieve balance. So then you're asking, what are your desires, right? My values and my desires are that you enjoy your life, that you have rest and play, right? Good intentions. What needs are you protecting? Rest and play and creativity and some kind of purpose, right? Often the taskmaster is protecting like kind of more core needs of I need to get well, not, they're both core, I guess. Sustenance, maybe validation from other people. Those are the needs they're trying to meet, and the procrastinator is trying to meet the needs of rest and play and creativity and that kind of thing. Okay, so and then you can ask the procrastinator, and they'll likely say the same thing. Well, if he wasn't so extreme, if he wasn't pushing and pushing all the time, and he allowed some specific time for play and rest, then I wouldn't have to do this. So So let's say that in that situation, the one that was burdened first was the taskmaster. It learned from a very early age to push and push you to get your worth. Then the procrastinator developed an equal and opposite form, right? So since this one developed first, the solution would be to go to the taskmaster, instead, you'll be worthless. Ooh, that's pointing to an exile who holds the burden of worthlessness. And you can get curious about, when did that part get that message? What happened? And do all the steps of time traveling back to that situation or situations, witnessing it from self, right? Having the connection between that part or parts and the self. I see you, I get you, get how you got this. This is the truth from this unconditionally loving source. Let me redo it. What do you need me to do with or for you back here? Um, and then retrieve them, bring them into the safe present, help them unburden that huge weight of worthlessness and experience something different, have a disconfirming experience with the self, where the self can just radiate their worth back to them and they see it, they sense it, they feel it, right? Oh, I am worthy. Like, you are treating me as worthy. And then the self builds that secure connection and shows them their worth over and over and over as you meet with them, just briefly each day. And as that worthlessness is unburdened and that part feels integrated, the taskmaster no longer has to push and push and push you beyond your capacity to gain worth because you already know you have it. So the taskmaster can relax and then allow some room for rest and play and really values you. And now the procrastinator can also relax. So, but let's say in this actual meeting, after the two have been heard, uh, what I like to do, so as the self, I am the main person. I'm listening to each one. I'm checking, did you each hear each other? But then at the very end, in the agreement stage, I actually step back because if they have softened enough toward each other to at least see each other's good intention and the needs and values they protect, I invite them to come in front of me into this open field or space, or whatever, and come up with a solution, a creative solution that meets both their needs and that they both have veto power. So the taskmaster might say, well, I think we need to work really hard for 50 hours a week and then we can play. And the procrastinator can say, no, that's too much to me. That feels extreme. So they have to agree on it. They both have veto power. So then they might start negotiating. And this is such a fascinating step to me. I love this. When I just watch the parts come up with ideas that I had never thought of before, to try out. And it's a really creative space where they come up with experiments. Let's try this. We will work really hard on this project for 2 hours, and then we'll take a half an hour break where we'll dance and have a snack or watch a show or call somebody or, do something fun. And then we'll do another block of work, take a significant break to walk outside in nature or whatever. And they're like working together on this plan. And it's always an experiment. They always say, okay, we're going to try this for a day or an hour or whatever they agree upon. And then we're going to come back together and reconvene and say, is it working? Is it not working for us? Right? Sometimes if you haven't healed the exile underneath, the uh the taskmaster is like, I just feel so insecure. I feel so worried. I feel so afraid, right? I feel so afraid that we're not going to get all our work done and we're going to not have worth or not have financial security, right? And so that really needs to be done. So sometimes they'll come back together and they'll say, okay, now our agreement, our next plan is like, hey, self, we really need you to help heal what's underneath this one. And that's what the agreement is. That's what the plan is. We're going to set the next appointment to meet with that part. Um, and if if this feels too overwhelming for you to do on your own, you can find a peer to hold space for you. You can find an IFS coach or therapist. You can go on Harmony IFS AI. I trust that it will lead you through a polarization work, um, or IFS Buddy, or the any kind of IFS AI can be really supportive to kind of just keep checking if you're in self energy. Once you are in self energy, you can just follow and do whatever your intuition leads you to do, and it will be very powerful. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. So that is the teaching that I have for today. Um, I hope you appreciated it. Again, you can get many other resources on my website. The nonviolent communication, the first part of it is basically nonviolent communication, which is mediation work on the outside, like between people. And then I go into IFS, which I feel like is mediation NVC on the inside. I call NVC IFS on the outside and IFS NVC on the inside. So, so you can go through that. There's a worksheet that you can will guide you through, even more probably than that, a slide to work with polarized parts. But you can just even bring up the slide that I just had up and go through it that way. I think I have a video with the worksheet that kind of describes more how to use it. I probably say the same things I just said to you right now. Um, and then there's also a guided meditation where I try to walk you through working with polarized parts. So there's so much support out there. Um, if you can, if your parts will let you, just reach out and get it. And if there are parts who block you from doing that, just see if you can get curious about what they're afraid it would happen if they let you, because their concerns will be valid. They will make sense. Their concerns need to be met first. Okay, so if you have watched this far, you can go ahead and leave an emoji that has to do with polarization. I don't know if they have a teeter-totter, or maybe a pendulum, or like those weighty things, a scale. It could be night and day, black and white, or it could be both and, like the yin and the yang, um, things like that. So you can put one of those emojis in and I'll know that you watched to the end. That's always fun for me. And I probably, for the next couple months, will just be doing one video a week instead of two, because we're traveling, it's holidays and all of that. I am looking forward. I think by the time this comes out tomorrow will be the second sensitively self-led support group, and we're going to work with one of our dominant masking parts, and I really look forward to that if you are joining me for that. Okay, and I will see you next time. May you be kind to yourselves and all of your parts until we meet again.